overall, nearly 1 in 5 adults in the US, about 18%, say that at some point they have taken the medication. That is an outrageously high number. So GLP-1s are medications, yeah, but this is also an industry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the How To Fitness podcast with me, Michael Ujoa.
And me, Kate Lyman.
And we are back with a deep dive and a part 3 of a topic. I don't think, have we actually done another part 2 apart from this?
No. I saw you label it part 3 and I oppose.
Okay. Tell me why. I welcome this.
Maybe this would be a part 2 building off of last season's GLP-1 episode.
Fair.
But part 1, I don't know what I said. I refuse to listen to it. I don't like it.
Okay. Welcome back to part 2 of the GLP-1
episodes. There you go. I think it's a continuation of the conversation. Let me tell you, and part of prepping for this episode, and I've been thinking about this episode for probably a month, like note taking, and I do a lot of like voice messages to myself while I'm walking and thinking stuff. But part of my preparation was listening to this season 3 GLP-1 episode. I think we just called it like what there is to know about GLP-1s in 2025. We'll link it in the show notes. And I was like, I absolutely do not want to listen to myself talk. Like, I don't listen back to you listen to our podcast. I absolutely do not.
Not for enjoyment, because I like listening to myself. I like to listen to the audio when it's done for like editing reasons. But yeah, it does feel a bit weird.
I won't even do that.
Listening back to
but do you know what? It wasn't bad. I was like, oh, that was good.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
And so I think this is a part 2 in the sense that so much of what I said, what we talked through around the mechanism of these medications, around just how we call them GLP-1s, but they're GLP-1 receptor agonists and sometimes they're dual receptor agonists, blah, blah, blah. All of that is true. And so it was actually really hard for me to write this and like be able to give the listener a baseline understanding of these medications without being so repetitive. So if you haven't listened, I would say it's maybe worth going back and listening to that episode.
Okay.
Because I think it just sets a baseline that's helpful. That said, I do still I'm going to give us a little intro to the medications again in case someone doesn't have that foundation.
Cool. I think this is an important topic. I think this kind of stemmed from a question we got right through our Instagram channel at How To Fitness Pod. For anyone listening who wants to check us out on Instagram and TikTok, that someone dropped us a message and they asking about coming off GLP-1 medications, and we hear so much stuff in the media at the moment about you have to be on them forever or you shouldn't be on them forever, or I think people are just a bit confused and a little bit scared as well, because a lot of people have gone down the route of weight loss medications, like the popularity is not the right word, the frequency of their use is so widespread now, and I think that the messaging that we see through social media especially and through news outlets has made people really afraid of what is next. So I'm hoping that, I don't know what Kate's going to say today, but I'm hoping we can kind of provide a bit of calm and a little bit of a sensible approach to this so that people feel a little bit more relaxed about the outcomes.
I hope so too. That's my intention, kind of talking through this question. Do you need to be on a GLP-1 forever? And what happens when you stop? There's so much new in this space, right? We're learning so much constantly. It's not necessarily that these medications are new. They're newer compared to other medications. It's that they're being used in different populations for different timelines, for different reasons, et cetera. And I come into this topic so interested, regardless of the podcast, because I, for one, and I'm sure you too, Michael, see industry changes, social changes, societal changes happening because of these medications. I can't posit that to like it's all positive or it's all negative. There's just a lot of changes, and I think head in the sand approach, I'm not sure if anyone's taking that, but like it would not be the way to approach this topic.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating actually since you did that last GLP-1 episode, because I think I said at the time, like I've worked with like 1 or 2 people who had used them. Because of that podcast episode, I had so many people reach out to me who wanted to work with a personal trainer but were worried about the judgment and the kind of stereotypes that came with people using GLP-1s, and they were delighted to hear that there were trainers out there, nutrition coaches out there that were happy to respond to this and work with clients in a really evidence-based and non-judgmental way. So I now have many clients that are using GLP-1 medications, and just to kind of reiterate some of the stuff we said in the last episode, they have been life-changing for so many people. And it is just so unfortunate that all we hear about are the celebrity culture or the misuse and the way people are buying them in really dodgy ways on the internet. And we're not focusing on, actually, these can be a really helpful tool if they're done in the right way. So yeah, it's been quite interesting. I don't know how many months ago was it we recorded that? Maybe like 6 months or so that we recorded that episode. Maybe even longer.
I have literally no idea.
I don't know.
What is
time?
But
I feel like the fitness landscape has changed a lot since then. It's really
much.
In such a short space of time. It's bizarre. So yeah, I'm excited for today, Kate.
we got online today and Michael was like, "How are you?" Like knowing that every time I prepare a podcast, listeners, I have a full crash out every single time.
Without fail.
Like this morning, how many times did I text Michael? I don't know, 1,000. I spiral so hard. And I love doing this. It's that I just want to talk about so many different topics and there's so much nuance and we only have so much time. And specifically on this topic of GLP-1 medications, like I don't want to just talk about these medications as medications alone. I want to talk about body politics and the impact on our industry and the worldwide industry and the less researched aspects of these medications. And of course, like the inherent weight stigma baked into everything we do and say. And so that's my crisis.
I felt so bad yesterday, Kate, by the way. So I had a really busy day yesterday. Like our car was in the garage because something was busted with it. And then my kid was sick, so I had to pick him up early from daycare. Then I was managing client work. So I didn't look at my text messages. And then I just looked at the messages in the evening after putting my son to bed. And I just saw this like stream of panic from Kate on my phone. I felt so bad because I just left you to it. But you'll be fine. You're always fine, Kate. We panic, but it always turns out great.
Sometimes I just need to get it out, you know?
Yeah, it's fine.
And something I said on the previous episode, last season's episode, is like, I don't have an opinion about GLP-1s. I have a million opinions. And they change based on circumstances. And there's so many different facets of these medications. To me, to have an opinion of they're all good or they're all bad or they're all going to save our life or they're all going to bring down society is outrageous. Like there's no way to simplify them that much. So let's go. Like we have. So I was like, Michael, the last thing I texted him out of the million things this morning was like, how long do you have? GLP-1s, and I guess this is kind of like the thesis I'm moving with today, aren't meant for a weight loss phase, right? They are meant for something closer to long-term symptom management. And that reality, if we face it in that way, forces a few slightly uncomfortable conversations. One, what happens when you stop? We don't always look that far ahead. 2, who are these truly for? And 3, what does this mean for weight stigma and our health culture and the way we talk about body size? And the only thing that made this preparation for this episode like a little easier was that I was able to pull from a presentation I gave to my KLN team on GLP-1s. I think I called it like the good, the bad, the science, the stigma. And I talked through a bazillion things. That was where I was like, hey team, how long do you have? And so I was able to pull from that presentation a little bit in talking about not just like the implications on our mental and physical health, but also the implications on diet culture and body satisfaction. And I'm going to do my best to bring some of that in here today while also answering the main question, do we have to be on GLP-1s forever? What happens when we stop? It's a lot.
I was going to say, I think every avenue there you just described is a podcast episode in itself. So, yeah.
Hence the freak out. I mean, that's literally why.
Because I think... And this is a compliment, you know. I think the reason that we both stress out and freak out about this, Kate, is because we do appreciate there's so much nuance around every fitness topic and every nutrition topic. However, weight loss medications are so charged. Like the conversations online are so gross and so judgy, once again. And we want to do it justice, and we don't want to do it in a way that offends a group intentionally or unintentionally. And trying to do it in your delicate manner, Kate, I appreciate that. That's where the freak out comes, right? We want to do this in a really sensible, kind way to every demographic listening to this. So you'll be fine once
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah. Doing my best. So let me first give this brief intro. And again, if you went back and listened to the past episode from season 3, maybe that'd be a little more context if needed. But GLP-1 is a hormone made in your gut. It's made in response to eating. Yeah, we do make it ourselves. Like there is natural GLP-1, but the half-life of the GLP-1 that we create naturally in our body is like 1 to 2 minutes. And the half-life in the medication is 1 week. That understanding enough like makes sense why these medications are so impressive and amazing. It also makes sense why the oral supplements or like the natural GLP-1 is total nonsense. What these medications do is they increase insulin secretion and reduce glucagon and slow gastric emptying, and they act on the brain also to reduce appetite, which overall lowers calorie intake, increase satiety, and leads someone to have fewer blood sugar spikes. It is not an appetite suppressant. A GLP-1 medication, GLP-1 receptor agonist, is not an appetite suppressant. It does so much more. There are many mechanisms of action. And understanding that also helps us understand where we talk about these medications around weight often, though they're initially for type 2 diabetics, but also how they impact our cardiometabolic health a lot. I'm going to kind of breeze through these stats that I was going to get into a little more, but last I looked in 2025, or last I could find, about 3% of the population in the UK was on a GLP-1.
That's huge.
It is. It's even less than I thought. Oh, wait, also, amendment 3% in Great Britain.
Okay.
Which is not the UK. I always have to look up that map with like circles, the different parts and the British.
Most people get it wrong. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, I know only if I look at that map. In the US, it's about 1 in 8 adults. That's 12%.
Wow. Okay.
That are currently taking a GLP-1 drug. Overall, nearly 1 in 5 adults in the US, about 18%, say that at some point they have taken the medication. Mm-hmm. That is an outrageously high number. So GLP-1s are medications, yeah, but this is also an industry. Mm-hmm. And we're recording this on, what is the day? January 30th, 2026. It just so happened, I mean, there's so much coming out about these medications all the time. Mm-hmm. I swear like half of the resources I quote today are from January 2026 alone. Mm-hmm. Like there's so much. But January 21, just a week ago, there was a recent article in U.S. News that reported on the industry-wide impact of these medications. I don't know if you saw anything of this, Michael, but there are these analysts at Jefferies that estimated that if average passenger weight drops 2%, that's what they modeled.
I did see this, yeah.
As GLP-1 use rises, U.S. airlines will save up to $580 million per year in fuel costs from lighter planes. Would tickets get cheaper?
No chance. Yeah, when I saw that, I was just like, what a kind of consumerist approach to this nonsense, like I hate it. I also just like a quick point on the stats that you gave there. It shows that people are using these medications for a short. It shows how people are using the meds, right? Because the amount of people that were using them but are now not using them shows that people need this kind of advice of what to do post coming off these meds. So that's really interesting. The
consumerist aspect is just like we're at a point where Wall Street is modeling the economic impact of people's appetite suppression. So that's really fun.
Yeah, what a time to be alive.
Chain restaurants are currently adjusting menus. There's like these lighter portion menus or protein forward menus or changes in menu language. And the one that made the biggest impact to me, I mean, the airline thing is probably just like good for a quick headline, but food marketing and packaging overall are shifting quite a bit away from a focus on calories and to a focus on nutrients. So a lot of protein forward labeling, this GLP-1 friendly labeling. If you're on YouTube, you can see my eyes roll, which is not an FDA regulated claim. Doesn't really even make sense. But like all this to say, we're talking about a medication, but we're also kind of talking about like this massive societal and cultural shift. It's a shift. Yeah. And I think for me, that's why part of the conversation feels so loaded. Like we're not just talking about appetite and blood sugar control. We're talking about what it means when smaller bodies become more accessible, but not equally accessible to all. Because to your point, Michael, saying like not everyone's on it for a long time, access is a huge issue. We'll talk about that. And we're talking about so much of what we know about these medications coming from like kind of a medical system perspective that's really entrenched in weight stigma. And we're talking about what happens when something intended for chronic disease management starts getting treated like a cosmetic tool, right? It was a few weeks ago, Michael, I sent you that reel. I don't know if you remember, but this girl was like, she was like a makeup influencer or something. And she was like, okay, I'm going on a GLP-1. It's just those last 10 pounds. Do you remember that? And I was aghast.
Yeah.
I went back and tried to find it and it was gone. Not surprising.
Yeah, they probably deleted it.
But I mean, that is happening. So that's exactly where we're going to go next. I don't think we can have a thoughtful conversation about GLP-1s without holding a few truths at once. One, these are legitimate medications that can dramatically improve the health for so many people. They're incredible. And
I think that's a really important point though, because I still think there's a lot of people that don't think that that's true.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I do still think there's a lot of judgment around people using GLP-1 medications. And I know that there's a lot of people that use them without telling anybody else that they're using them because of the stigma
Yeah.
that's attached to them.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I guess I do know that to be true. I'm just very like in it,
Yeah.
in talking and thinking about it myself. So I think I'm removed.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I also like have the unique perspective. Maybe you do as too, that like I don't go back to the US often, but when I do, I'm like, whoa, this place is different. You know, for numerous reasons, but like one, like people, everyone's on a GLP-1 and I'm like, what? This is actually real. I'm just in the research. I don't even know what's happening.
We're just in our offices, Kate. We don't see the real
No,
world.
seriously. I just live in this office. So one, these are legitimate medications that can dramatically improve health. And two, they're being pulled into a culture that already has a complicated relationship with weight loss. So we're going to talk about use and misuse. We're going to talk about long-term goals and what the best evidence says about what happens when you stop in a way that gives our listeners information that they can use to navigate all the info out there.
Can I just jump in here, Kate, and do the thing that we're also really bad at with every single episode? These podcast episodes, we do not have sponsorship deals. We don't bring in external brands to help market our podcast or to make money. This is all just me and Kate plugging away with our own sweat and tears and money. So if you enjoy these episodes, please hit the share button. Tell all your friends, leave a little comment, whatever it is. We would really, really appreciate it. Sorry, Kate, to interrupt you there.
No, that's a good interruption. Yes, thank you, Michael. We love our listeners. Okay, very, very quick, like a kind of a recap. I'm talking about GLP-1s. Names get a little confusing around these medications. People often use Ozempic as a catch-all. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Michael. It's like kind of people talking about saying Ozempic to mean all GLP-1s. When we say GLP-1, we're talking about a class of medications called GLP-1 receptor agonists. The big one you've heard of is semaglutide, maybe, possibly. That's Ozempic. So a GLP-1 receptor agonist is semaglutide. Ozempic was approved for type 2 diabetes in 2017. And then Wegovy is the approval for weight loss that happened in 2021. There's another medication we're often talking about, but kind of looping in the same, just calling it a GLP-1, tirzepatide. Tirzepatide is a GLP-1 and GIP dual receptor agonist, so it has two functions. This is Mounjaro, which is approved for type 2 diabetes in 2022, and Zepbound, which is approved for weight loss in 2023. There's others, liraglutide, duaglutide, blah, blah, blah. But semaglutide and tirzepatide are the ones kind of shaping the current conversation. And I want to like set that record straight because we are going to talk about a few studies that look at semaglutide and tirzepatide separately. But I'm just gonna talk about GLP-1s as that, and hopefully that makes sense. So what happens over time when people stay on these meds, and what happens when they stop? I think the biggest misconception and misunderstanding, maybe is a better way to say it, that we see right now is the idea that GLP-1s are for weight loss alone, and maybe a weight loss phase where you could take them for a bit, hit a goal weight, stop, and your body is where you left off. And not only is this approaching these medications as like a cosmetic fix, which has never been the point, but it's kind of missing the whole point of the medication and the cardiometabolic benefits. When viewed through this lens, I think it's just another extension of diet culture. We're just talking about weight loss for the sake of weight loss or for the sake of beauty standards or cosmetic or aesthetic appeal, and not really understanding these medications. And, you know, back to the point of you saying many people don't understand how great these can be. Maybe it's when viewed through that lens. Mm-hmm. And that would make sense to me.
When we look, I'm trying to word this in a really sensible way. Are you against? I don't know. We feel free to cut this if this doesn't come across in the right way, Kate. But are you against people using it in that way? Is probably the question I'm getting at. In using it for like a short period of time. Of this is the last 10 pounds. I'd like to. Is that a good question or a bad question? I don't know. It's just because I think a lot of people are using them in that way. You know. That's
kind of what I want the message of this episode to be, really. So maybe at the end, I'm going to tell my thoughts, but that is, keep this in because it is a really good question. And that is kind of the lens through which I approached all the research I pulled.
Okay.
because I can't say if it's good or bad. I don't know. I can sit here and guess what? I've done this the last 7 days. I've prepared this episode and argue back and forth with myself into infinity because I can see so many different sides. But my goal is like, let's look at the information. Let's look at the literature. What does it say? And then I think it answers that question for some people.
Yeah, because I think before we know that
Because I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah,
too.
of course. My initial thoughts here are I can see both camps, as you just mentioned there, of those people who don't feel comfortable or happy. I'm not going to be the person that's going to judge them and be like, well, that's wrong. I don't think you should do that. But then also you see it on the other hand where people maybe are at like a healthy weight, or they're probably where their body should be, and then they start using these medications in a kind of a non-sensible way. I don't know if I'm saying my words correctly here, Kate. That's the issue with this topic. I don't want to annoy anyone, and I also don't know where I stand on the topic. It's so bizarre. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're getting a little taste, just a little taste of what's been going on in my brain.
Yeah. Love it.
Okay, so I think we come back to that at the end, Michael, because I think that's important. When we now look at the literature, which is what we're going to do right now, I think we get a far clearer picture of the actual intent of these medications. I've been so conscious not to throw opinion or like conjecture into the conversation because we have long-term trials that actually show us some really important things. One, what semaglutide and tirzepatide tend to do over a longer timeline, not like 12 weeks. And two, what tends to happen with weight and cardiometabolic markers when treatment is withdrawn. There are some very important clinical trials, the STEP trials for semaglutide and the SURMOUNT trials for tirzepatide. And I believe in all the episodes we've done on GLP-1s, I've talked about them because it's kind of where we know the most information. The STEP trials are these clinical trials looking at the efficacy of semaglutide, and there are many. But I want to hone in on one, the STEP 1 trial extension, which specifically looked at weight regain and cardiometabolic benefits after discontinuing semaglutide. So here are the findings, Wilding et al., 2022. Step 1 randomized 1,961 adults with obesity but without diabetes, and it put them on once weekly semaglutide, same dosing as someone would take now. And at 68 weeks, the mean weight loss was 17.3% of body weight, compared to 2% of the placebo. That's a lot of body weight. It's a lot. Then people discontinued the meds, and those on the semaglutide regained back 11.6% of the body weight, and those on the placebo, 1.9%. So like basically all of it. And that means that a net of 5.6% body weight was lost by week 120. Like that evened out to that. It's not insignificant by any means. I think it bears a mention of how bad weight cycling is for us. That's not ideal. But here's the other part. Cardiometabolic improvements were also back to baseline at 120 weeks. Blood pressure, cholesterol, A1C, there were huge improvements through the intervention, and they all returned to baseline as well. So participants regained 2/3 of prior weight loss and went back to baseline on these health markers. The results section of this paper itself says, findings confirm the chronicity of obesity and suggest ongoing treatment is required to maintain improvements in weight and health.
Were they kind of checking with exercise output and activity levels for all the people in the study? There was none on that. Okay.
No, so that's another one we're going to get into, but this was purely looking at the medication and weight. Okay. And kind of on the tirzepatide side, SURMOUNT 4 was a study where everyone started with an open label period where they took tirzepatide for 36 weeks. Over that lead-in phase, the average weight loss was about 20.9% of body weight. Wow. That's outrageous. That's just so much. Then participants were randomized. So half continued the tirzepatide and half switched to a placebo for another 52 weeks. Lifestyle intervention in this continued in both groups. Cool. I don't have specifics for what that was. I didn't write it down. But this is where like this kind of withdrawal design study is really helpful because we're basically asking, okay, what happens when you take the medication away and everything's the same? From that randomization point at week 36, the group who switched to placebo experienced about 14% weight regain, while the group that stayed on the tirzepatide lost an additional 5.5% of weight. So there's evidence that with tirzepatide withdrawal, many of the initial improvements like HbA1c, fasting glucose, insulin, cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure began reversing alongside the weight regain, even with lifestyle interventions still happening. So you end up with these two very different trajectories. Continuation looks like maintenance or further loss. Withdrawal looks like regain. These medications can produce significant weight loss and significant cardiometabolic improvements when they're in use. And then if you withdraw the medication, regain is common. Health markers drift back because the physiology the medication was helping to manage comes back, right? Now, what just hit the headlines this month, it did make it to like popular, like on the Times and CNN and whatever, but it's actually this massive meta-analysis in the BMJ of January 2026. It came out. This meta-analysis looked at 37 existing studies with over 9,000 participants. The average treatment, in my opinion, was short. It was like 39 weeks with a follow-up period of 32 weeks. But what this found was rapid regain of weight after cessation of meds, with expectations all cardiometabolic markers will return to baseline within 1.4 years. The headline part, and why I said it made it to headlines, is extrapolating off of the studies. It showed that weight regain is 4 times faster after cessation of a GLP-1 than if you just stop diet and exercise. That's the part.
Wow,
I don't know if you saw anything being like, weight regain 4 times worse with GLP-1s. In fact, I have, for those watching on YouTube, I'll bring up the BMJ graphic that came with it because I think it's really helpful. But if we understand how these medications work in our bodies, this all makes a lot of sense. And so this is what I want listeners to gain a greater understanding of, because I think it removes a lot of the like, well, is it good? Is it bad? What does it do? From our thought process. So like I said, a GLP-1 medication, whether it's semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide's coming around the corner, or any of the others, it does a lot of different things. It is not an appetite suppressant. It is functioning in our brain, in our digestive system, in all these different areas of our body. So in the brain, what these medications do is they increase satiety, so we feel more satisfaction with food. They decrease anxiety around food and cravings. It's the quieting of the food noise we hear a lot of people say. And GLP-1 medications affect reward pathways in our brain. So many people experience like less of a hedonic pull towards hyperpalatable food while on these medications. This is where in the season 3 episode, I talked a lot about the medication use for substance use disorder, which I find so fascinating. But that makes sense when we recognize how it targets the reward system of the brain. So knowing this, what happens to the brain after we stop? After weight loss and without medication, hunger signaling tends to increase and ghrelin levels often rise. So ghrelin is the hormone telling us we're hungry. I'll never forget my first nutrition class in college. My professor said, ghrelin, growl of the stomach. It means you're hungry. So that's how I remember
This
ghrelin.
is how I remember it now, ever since you told me on these podcast episodes, Kate. It's so good.
A rebounding appetite can be disproportionately strong relative to your drop in energy expenditure, meaning big hunger after significant weight loss. And I think, weight regain, as is traditionally seen, is often viewed as like a moral failure. But when we understand the biology, it makes a lot more sense. A big point of discussion around these medications is quieting the food noise. Well, that food noise will return because the reward signaling isn't being dampened anymore. Like, think medications help these GLP-1 medications like kind of turn down the dial on pleasure and reward, and you are no longer on them and it goes back up. So that makes a lot of sense, right? In our digestive system, how do these medications work? They increase sensitivity to high fat and high sugar foods. They decrease gastric emptying, so we feel full sooner. This is an area where we see a lot of the side effects, right? Nausea, heartburn, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, etc. After we stop the medication, that delayed gastric emptying effect is gone. So fullness signals do not last as long. Volume tolerance also goes up, so it's easier to eat more than before in order to feel satisfied. This is why we're seeing this weight regain. Not because people are bad at keeping the weight off. It's because when we have a medication doing so many different functions in our bodies and all of a sudden that's gone, and I would say if we have some of the tools to manage, it's going to make it easier. But even with tools, it's going to be hard to kind of navigate this whiplash of being off the meds. So in terms of hormones, these medications are also impacting our hormone pathways or responses. So increased glucose uptake means that our body can better use carbs for energy. And decreased insulin resistance means that we have a reduced ability to store excess calories as fat. This is where we see a lot of those cardiometabolic benefits. So what happens after we stop? Well, weight loss does improve insulin sensitivity, but while we're on a GLP-1, there's this like direct pharmacologic support for glycemic control. When you stop the med, that goes away. And that's actually a big part of what that step 1 trial, that extension that I talked about earlier referenced. Now, inflammation. What do these medications do? They increase ability for macrophages to work. This means our immune cells shift from promoting inflammation to reducing it. They decrease pro-inflammatory cytokines, and
cool.
they inhibit how inflammatory genes respond to triggers. Isn't that so
That
cool?
is really cool. I didn't know that happened from these meds. Yeah.
That's to me the most incredible part of these meds. I think the rewards system and then this the inflammatory response or anti-inflammatory response.
I had no idea that happened. That's really cool.
After we stop, these pharmacologic benefits are gone. They don't continue. Remember back the 1 week half-life of these meds? So then there is, of course, also, with all of these pathways we're talking about, metabolic adaptation. I'm going to, for the sake of time, kind of assume that our listeners are already relatively familiar, but adaptive thermogenesis or metabolic adaptation is, our metabolism adapting to a smaller body, less food being given to it. This is going to occur still with weight loss on our GLP-1. GLP-1s do not prevent this, but they can make it easier to tolerate because appetite is suppressed.
Yeah. I guess in short, so to describe it to listeners, it's like there's less of you to sustain, therefore you need less energy,
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. GLP-1s, they do improve metabolic control, but they don't rebuild our metabolic capacity. Once you're off the meds, it remains true that you need fewer calories to maintain body weight, and you have a lower expenditure and a higher appetite drive. And that is hard to will your way through, and that, in my opinion, gives clarity to why these medications are either something to be used long term and or not a quick solution for the last 10 pounds.
Agreed. It's yeah, because I guess a lot of people who will probably take these meds to lose the last 10 pounds, if we use that quote, have probably been dieting for a long time and struggling to remove that last 10 pounds. And you're struggling to do that at a higher body weight. So as soon as you take these medications, it dampens everything. There is now less of you. You come off these meds. You struggling to drop that weight, you're just in the exact same position there, but with even less of you, so it's even harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is not me saying yes, no, whatever. It's just here's the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it still depends on the person. So here are some impacts that are not in the literature, but are in my brain. After having a little less scientific, after having worked
look at the
with
reference
people,
list of this episode, and it's just
clients
Kate's brain 2026 in brackets tired.
Yeah, exactly. After a few years of working with individuals on GLP-1s and just kind of thinking about this constantly, if food has been a coping mechanism for us our whole lives, and that mechanism is now gone because of these medications, because of a dampened response, because of all the things we just talked about, and you haven't actively replaced that coping or self-regulation with something else, it's still going to be a problem when you come off these medications. If you haven't updated your identity during your time on these medications and your self-talk and your self-compassion, that's going to be a problem. I don't have hard literature to show this, but I have a lot of anecdotal experience and a lot of thought and knowing about, behavioral health. But if you have always been the foodie friend or the bigger friend, something like that, and your body changes rapidly, because the weight loss in these medications is rapid, but you haven't really updated your identity or changed what you value or, adjusted your intrinsic motivators, I don't think you're going to feel great in your new body either, because our weight can change, but we need to change mindset as well. Does that make sense?
does make-
I'm like trying to explain it best I can with kind of what I've observed and thought. And if you have not utilized your time on this medication to strengthen habits and behaviors, you still don't have those habits and behaviors once time off the medication comes.
The first thing that springs to mind when you say this, because I know for anyone who listened to the previous episode, there's a lot of research of now coming out of using these within addiction, right? For like drugs and alcohol. I'm intrigued to see how that works. I know this is very off track from what this episode is on.
Like,
but
would it be long-term
yeah,
usage?
exactly. But then, would it be long-term usage there too? I'd be interested to see how that...
Wow. Okay. So that kind of just pairs really well with like some of those behavioral health aspects I mentioned, because I would assume you'd need the same like cognitive behavioral therapy
Yeah,
or whatever
absolutely.
intervention you're
Yeah,
using alongside. But also I can see where, addiction has like pathological pathways and like where the medication would be used long term. Oh, look, I just contradicted myself again.
Classic.
Imagine that.
Yeah, this is the topic for both of us. It's tough. Yeah, wow.
I want to talk about weight and health maintenance and how those can happen on a GLP-1, because it's not all doom and gloom, by the way. Like, I think that we actually have research to show doesn't have to be the case. But, the studies that we're looking at just now show rapid regain when there's like an abrupt stop in the medications, right? Like that wouldn't be ideal. But we need to swerve. And this is where yesterday I'm like in a panic texting Michael and he's ignoring me. Just kidding. But where I was like, I'm having a breakdown. Basically everything we are talking about right now operates under the assumption or understanding that obesity is a chronic disease. And the World Health Organization does...
Who? Got to be done every time. Sorry, it has to be done.
Dad joke.
Yeah.
Does classify it such straight from the website says obesity is classified by the World Health Organization as a chronic relapsing disease arising from complex interactions between genetics, neurobiology, eating behaviors, access to healthy diet, market forces, and the broader environment. Obesity is also measured by BMI, and we know that BMI is really, really flawed. We also know that there are metabolically healthy, obese individuals out there. So all of my education and training, and I assume yours too, Michael, is under this assumption of obesity as a chronic disease, right? Like in science, that's kind of what you get. In public health, it's definitely how we operate. And so that is the lens that I'm operating under today and using and kind of looking at this conversation through. And I'm newer to deconstructing just how much weight stigma is built into our medical system. Like it is hard. That is a hard thing. It's like deconstructing anything else to be like, oh wait, I have been perpetuating this for a long time. So preparing this episode has kind of plagued me because I do not want to add to that weight stigma. And while I think GLP-1 medications are incredible in so many ways, I think they're also entrenching us further in a place of weight stigma, in a place where weight and health are completely correlated when that's just not always the case.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite Substacks, I think it's literally called Weight and Healthcare. I'll put it in the show notes, but is by Reagan Chastain. She's a writer and a researcher and kind of a thought leader in the weight stigma and healthcare space. And she did this 3-part breakdown of that new BMJ research about rapid weight gain after GLP-1. In general, she's very outspoken about obesity not being a chronic disease because someone's size doesn't necessarily mean their symptomology. And I absolutely am taking that into account, and I'm trying to learn from her as best I can. And like it's a whole conversation here around weight stigma and the healthcare system that we don't get to go into, and that kind of hurts me. And I'm also constantly learning and like making mistakes and trying to challenge my own assumptions. But that I have to like point out that we're operating under this idea of chronic disease. obesity as a chronic disease. And that's not always the agreement, and that might not be right.
Yeah, which I think is probably where a lot of the online discourse, people fight over this, probably for that exact reason, right? I think we're always approaching these topics in a nice, nuanced and balanced way, Kate. I'm sure there's probably some people that listen that think we don't do that well enough, because you can never do that well enough for everybody. But yeah, I do like to think that the way we've approached with these discussions is sensible.
I hope.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So with this in mind, with knowing the functions and the mechanisms of these medications and the pharmacologic benefits and how they stop when the meds stop, I think we feel a little more clear maybe how and why these meds aren't necessarily like the last 10 pounds. I keep using that phrase because I think it just portrays what we're talking about. So I'm going to keep using it. I don't really like it, but whatever. These medications aren't a cure. They're symptom management in a way. And if we're operating from the lens of obesity as a multifactorial chronic disease, then it makes sense that a medication that manages all these symptoms will be a medication that is required long term. So that's kind of the suggestion given to every study we've looked at. So just end of last year, December 2025, the World Health Organization, I'm saying that so Michael doesn't dad joke me, put out this landmark policy change. And I will, of course, link it in the show notes. It contains 2 conditional recommendations about GLP-1s. By the way, I think it was a big deal and pretty cool that the WHO put out a statement on GLP-1s. A big reason for this is they want to expand access. But the 2 conditional recommendations were, 1, GLP-1 therapies may be used by adults, but excluding pregnant women, for the long-term treatment of obesity. While the efficacy of these therapies in treating obesity and improving metabolic and other outcomes was evident, the recommendation is conditional due to limited data on their long-term efficacy and safety, maintenance and discontinuation, their current costs, inadequate healthcare system preparedness, and potential equity implications. The second was intensive behavioral interventions, including structured interventions involving healthy diet and physical activity, may be offered to adults living with obesity, prescribed GLP-1 therapies. Like I said, big reason for this is wanting to expand access. You could be on a GLP-1 with the intention to be on it forever, but then your insurance coverage changes.
Yeah.
Or your financial position changes and you can't afford it, even if insurance is helping you cover it. Or, the negative symptoms outweigh the benefits. Access is a privilege right now. And we could go into a whole other thing about how ridiculous that is, that that's the case. But it is a really unfortunate reality.
And I think that is the reality for a lot of people, right? I've spoken to so many people through social media that have this exact issue. I've had clients who've had this exact issue where it sounds like they're wanting to treat it as a long-term treatment, but they're not giving people access long-term because you might hit a certain BMI and therefore you no longer don't qualify and you have to pay for the medication yourself, So it feels like the system isn't in place to actually use them in the way that they're wanting them to be used, which is bizarre.
Correct. Yeah, it's just not updated to the reality of the medications, despite what all the research says. So, discontinuation of a GLP-1 med at this point looks like, 1, not discontinuing, staying on it forever, at a sustainable low dose. And there are dosing schedules that it's not like you stay on the highest dose forever. 2, quitting cold turkey. Not ideal. Big chance of not just weight regain, but returning to cardiometabolic baseline where you started. 3, tapering dosing, which is kind of like spacing your injections out or cutting the dose in half. There are tapered schedules. This is far more ideal for appetite control and ongoing adjustments and being able to stay pretty in tune with how your body is feeling. But sometimes those options aren't in someone's control because of the coverage like we're talking about. Here's some good news though. Some good stuff.
We need this, Kate. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's pick the vibes up.
Say you stop medication. There are ways to support weight maintenance post GLP-1. And the most fantastic study I want to bring up is by Jensen et al. In 2024.
I'm so glad you said there's a study because
Denmark.
I was like, please, there's got to be some research into this.
No, there is. It's
okay,
great.
Cool. Okay.
Out of Denmark, published as part of the Lancet. And in the study, everyone went through the same initial weight loss phase. an 8-week, what I'm assuming very low calorie diet, because on average participants lost about 13 kilos, so 28 to 29 pounds. They were people in bigger bodies, so there was weight to lose, but still that's pretty intense. Then all those individuals entered a 1-year maintenance phase where they were randomly assigned to one of 4 groups. 1, supervised exercise. 2, a GLP-1 medication. 3, both exercise and the medication. 4, placebo. I'm going to note that it was a liraglutide daily injection, same mechanism of action and everything. It's just a daily instead of weekly. After a year of that treatment, whatever they were randomized to, they stopped. No more exercise program, no more medication. And when they compared what happened after stopping, those who had been on the medication alone regained more weight than those who had been in the supervised exercise group. The difference was like 6 kilos, around 13 pounds, pretty significant. More regain after stopping the medication compared to stopping exercise. And the best outcomes, probably not surprisingly, were in the group that had both exercise and medication. That combination helped people maintain more of the weight loss and body fat reduction after everything stopped compared to medication alone. If the medication is doing the heavy lifting for appetite and your physiology while you're on it, you still want to be building the structure that will continue to carry you in your health when it is gone. Exercise is one of those strongest areas of structure, really, because it helps us protect lean mass, it supports our metabolic health, and it helps with energy balance, which is what we're talking about, right? Like energy balance at a new lower weight is very hard to maintain. So if someone is on a GLP-1 and they're thinking long-term, the goal is not just eat less while I'm on this medication because it's easier to do. The goal is use the window of reduced food noise or reduced hunger to build habits that are kind of like a scaffolding for later in life. It's consistent movement, it's resistance training, especially it's adequate protein intake. It's a plan for monitoring hunger and what your response to said hunger is going to look like when hunger increases. So I wrestle with saying, okay, weight regain is the default versus it doesn't have to be the default. I don't know that we could say either way, but I think it's clear that if we have some structure in place to counteract metabolic adaptation and appetite regulation rebound,
dampen it slightly. Yeah,
we can dampen it. Yeah, there is also, and for the sake of time, I won't even get into this, but there's like very proactive cognitive behavioral therapy behavior interventions, like, catching your thoughts and working through CBT techniques so that when and if hunger comes back or like the desire to, follow cravings the second they come up, we can kind of proactively work against those or around preventing those or redirecting. Another metric that helps with weight maintenance, not sure how much I love this one, but this is what the literature said, is metrics like weighing daily. Staying in tune with what's happening to your body. I could again argue both sides. It kind of depends on the individual. So the support while on these medications, the scaffolding we're talking about, what matters for weight maintenance is protecting muscle mass, right? Trying to minimize the amount of muscle mass lost during weight loss and building muscle mass if you can. 2, mitigating symptoms. We didn't even talk about symptoms, but there are bad negative symptoms from these medications. So mitigating those symptoms. Some of that's dosing, some of that's stuff we can actually do to support ourselves with food intake or food timing or whatever. 3rd, adequate protein intake is essential. I know we're in a space and time where it's just exhausting to hear about protein intake, but I cannot emphasize enough just how important protein intake is in this respect. And then another 4th, ensuring high quality food choices, even with lower food intake. Because, you are going to be eating less, but it's really important what the quality of our food is still. Now, there is an article that came out of the University of Cambridge, January 15th, titled "Experts Sound Alarm Over Nutritional Gaps in People Taking Ozempic and Wegovy." I'm going to read directly from it. This new research suggests that people using next generation weight loss drugs may be losing weight without the nutritional support needed to protect long-term health. researchers reported major gaps in knowledge about how dietary support influences calorie intake, body composition, protein intake, and patient experiences. This was a report reviewing a study out of Oxford about kind of modeling or assuming nutritional deficiencies while on a GLP-1. I say that because they were just looking at cross-sectional data, and there aren't actually any studies right now that look at nutrient intake for GLP-1 users, which is ridiculous. What they found without like actually studying this is GLP-1 user is going to reduce their intake, their caloric intake by 16 to 30%, pretty significant. And that 40% of that weight loss could be lean body mass, muscle and bone density. Doesn't have to be,
but it can be,
but could be. They found that 98% of GLP-1 users fall below recommended intake of vitamin D and potassium, which is just like all of them. And that average fiber was around 14.5 grams when the recommended is 20 to 25 grams. They also found that only 20% of GLP-1 users are referred to a dietitian. So the reason I'm like yeah. The reason I'm like speaking about this so hesitantly is because it wasn't like, this is what the research shows. It's like looking at all these populations, here's the patterns we're finding.
It makes sense though, right? Like it does make sense. And that is always the worry, right? I think most people who aren't on GLP-1s probably aren't eating the amount of nutrients that we need actually to call it a healthy diet in air quotes. So when you start taking GLP-1s, you're putting people at even greater risk, which I guess then you would argue for GLP-1 led foods in restaurants that maybe are more nutrient dense, or you know what, like it opens up so many different avenues of things that you can discuss about what is required for this to be done healthily, if that's a thing, you know.
Yeah, and you're getting what I'm saying. It's like don't worry about those numbers. It's the implication of them, right? Eating less leads to weight loss. GLP-1s can improve cardiometabolic health markers, but without behavioral or nutritional support, we are inviting a host of brand new health issues or complications, right? Like we're just saying, well, I don't have excess body weight, but now have nutrient deficiency. Like that's not what we want. And I have extreme bias that lifestyle support is necessary. And that remains true whether you're looking at this through the lens of obesity as a chronic relapsing disease or whether you hate that framing and vehemently disagree. Like it's still true. Because either way, if we're talking about a medication that can meaningfully change appetite regulation, blood sugar control, inflammation signaling, reward pathways, etc., support still matters. And I think one of the most impactful shifts we can make in how we talk about these medications is focusing less on the, cosmetic transformation, for lack of better words, and more on the cardiometabolic health outcomes, because that allows us to shift towards like long-term health. And those are what change our health span essentially. Because there is a reality that a smaller body is not a guarantee of better health. And I think that conflation is part of the challenge of this conversation. But improvements in markers like blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity and triglycerides, blood pressure, sleep apnea risk, mobility, inflammation, those are very real and those are measurable. And they're often the difference between someone feeling like their body is constantly working against them and someone feeling like they can participate in healthful behaviors again. Do you have something?
No, I do. I have a few thoughts, but I don't want to ruin your flow. Sorry, Kate. I'm not very good at. I've got a really rubbish poker face, so I'm thinking.
I know. I was like, I'm waiting.
Please, I'll let you carry on first before I am.
Don't worry. I know we need to wrap up, but I have to give a little mention to mental and social health here because I think this is part of the conversation. Some people are experiencing this medication as life-changing because it quiets food noise and reduces compulsive thoughts and allows them to live a life where it's easier to engage in the behaviors they want to engage in. And it's incredible. There is a little bit of me that's always hesitant because I don't think we talk about the mental health implications enough. There are people who report like anhedonia, like a flattening effect, less interest in food, but less interest in pleasure in general. And it's like kind of apathy towards life. And when we look at the evidence around mental health outcomes, it's very mixed. And I want to be careful here because it's, we can find the literature in both ways, but there was a large observational study published in 2024 that reported an association between GLP-1 receptor agonist use and increased risk of psychiatric outcomes, including major depression, anxiety, and suicidal behavior in populations with obesity. Important caveat, it's not the same thing as like proving that these cause those outcomes. It's not true. But it's like important to think about the mental health implications. On the flip side, I think just this month, the FDA removed the warning of suicidal ideation from the box of GLP-1s. So they found that there is enough evidence to prove that that does not happen.
It's reassuring.
So yeah. I think we have enough. We don't have all the information, but there's enough complexity, like take mental health seriously here. I think it means if someone has a history of depression, anxiety, suicidality, it means that if someone has a history of depression or anxiety or suicidal thoughts or an eating disorder, or you're currently in a really fragile place, it's definitely part of the conversation. The evidence around eating disorder is also really limited, but it's not hard to understand why this could be really, really complicated. If someone's already prone to restriction or body checking or control around food, a medication that suppresses appetite can be, reinforcing that in ways that are not ideal whatsoever. I understand that there's research out there supporting usage for those with binge eating disorder, and I still think it comes with a lot of caveats and nuance. But anyway, worth a mention. And last, I swear, I promise I'm gonna finish this, Michael. We cannot overlook the role stigma and privilege play in these medications. Like, we're watching a world where thinness becomes more medically accessible. Mm-hmm. And when that's not actually the goal, our health should be the goal. And that means we're at risk of creating a new version of like same old, right? People in larger bodies are seen as lesser for a reason or not trying hard enough or whatever it may be. But in reality, like access, insurance coverage, income, healthcare quality shape who gets to use these tools and who doesn't. GLP-1s are not cheating. I would hope I don't even have to say that given the context of all of this episode, but I'm going to say it anyway. Mm-hmm. Thinness is not superior, and it hasn't been a product of discipline ever, like across the board. So I think that if anything, part of these medications expose how like moralized our conversations about weight have been all along. There is misuse, not because people are bad, but because diet culture is really, really powerful and fitness culture rewards being lean, right? And many people have been taught that smaller is better. But I think that there's a really important question for us all to think about. How do we support those who truly benefit from these medications for health, for symptom management, for quality of life, without turning GLP-1s into like the new standard for acceptable bodies? I have no answer on how to do that, but I think it's worth thinking about.
I think that's summarized very, very well. I think we just, as we kind of hinted at the start of the episode, didn't we? We've seen the landscape of the fitness industry massively shift. The landscape of social media has massively shifted over the last like 6 to 12 months. I know many like body positive, body neutral, whatever bracket you want to put people in, content creators really look and feel burnt out from trying to champion a balanced and healthy message. The amount of comments, like hateful comments people are receiving in regards to the way their bodies look, I think is now at an all-time high. And I think that's absolutely, GLP-1s has a part to play in that. I guess like the 3 takeaways, I'm trying to like summarize your whole episode, Kate, here into like what I've taken away from it is the way these medications are being advertised, or the way that these companies are telling us they should be used, is they probably should be used long-term. Like that feels like that's what the overall goal is here. So I think if people are considering taking them, they need to really think about the implications of that and whether that's something that they want to do. I guess then on the other hand, if you're someone who is maybe going to take it and you can't take it forever because of money, access, all these kinds of things, there is some research showing hope, in air quotes, if that's the right word, that you can sustain weight loss after coming off these medications as long as it's done in the right way. And then number 3, that there's still a lot of unknown about these meds too, that we need to be really aware of. We don't have we have a lot of answers. We don't have a lot of all the answers at the moment. And I think that that's important to point out. Yeah, I think that's the kind of quick summary takeaways there, but a very cool episode, Kate. I loved that.
Thank you for summarizing. So I have.
I hope I didn't step on your summary there, Kate.
No, you didn't.
Okay,
You actually
good.
did. You did it perfectly. And I have a whole list of stuff we didn't get to that I would love to get to one day. And one of the things I knew I wouldn't have time to talk through is just kind of some questions we can ask ourselves if this is something we're considering for ourselves, if we want to share with someone else. And at the expense of just like talking through these questions, I'm going to link them in the show notes because I have like a written 2-page PDF of this that I share with my clients at times. So I'm gonna link that
Awesome.
in the show notes. And I hope that the goal of this episode feels like not to tell you what to do, because that's never what we're trying to do, but giving you information so you can make better decisions for yourself or ask better questions or support those around you on these medications better. So you can help understand your own motivations as well. And we live in a world where these medications are common. They're not going to go anywhere. So the best thing we can do is educate ourselves.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much, Kate. That was awesome.
Thank you for bearing with me. I'm sweating. I'm sweating right now.
So sometimes with the link, me and Kate, we're on different sides of the world. Internet signals go up and down. Kate's a little bit pixelated right now, so I can't see how sweaty you are. So it's fine. I look forward to the YouTube high definition version when I watch it back. But honestly, that was awesome, Kate. Thank you so much. And anyone who listened to this episode, if you enjoyed it, if you have any thoughts, please let us know. Please review our podcast episode once again. We do really, really appreciate the support, all the kind words, messages, questions, and stuff that we receive. It means a hell of a lot. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon.
See ya.